think now I take questions. Yes?
Two parts. What part does minimum mandatory sentencing play, and what part do private for-profit prisons play in the problem?
I'm going to start with the second one. Private for-profit prisons are horrible. They are legalized slavery. They should all be abolished. And they are, Evan, you're not going to clap. You're not going to clap for me. They're not the problem. They're not the problem. 85% of all prisoners in Arizona are in public prisons. We could let every single person in private prison out today. We would still have the 5th highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. Didn't mention that. Arizona has, if you look at it per capita per 100,000, Arizona has the 5th highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. So they're terrible, they're awful. It's legalized slavery, but it is not the problem. Mandatory minimum sentencing is one of the critical tools that allows prosecutors to do whatever they want. Because if I go to trial for stealing a car, and according to mandatory minimum sentencing, the judge has to sentence me to 5 years in prison for stealing that car, that's what gives the prosecutor the power to offer me a plea agreement to 2.5 years. Because my lawyer is going to tell me, listen, you can roll the dice and go to trial, but if you lose, the judge loves you, it's very sympathetic, the judge is going to want to give you probation, but the judge has to send you to 5 years in prison. Better to take this plea to 2.5 years. It is what gives the prosecutor power to enter into these unequal contracts that we call plea agreements.
So you touched a little bit on disenfranchisement by felons here in Arizona and all over the United States that go to vote after they've received their conviction. What are some of the steps in Arizona you would need to take if you're a first-time felon wanting to restore your rights?
So technically in Arizona, the rule is that first-time felons who have not been convicted of a violent offense or a sex offense get their civil rights restored automatically when they complete probation. That's often not the practice. Judges often do not do it automatically, even though they should. So what I would recommend is coming to our rights restoration clinics that we have at the Public Defender's Office every Wednesday from 9 to noon and 1 to 4. You can also talk to any criminal defense attorney, but we actually do that work for free for every member of our community.
I agree with you that we need to elect the right people that see the fallacy of what we're doing now. But unless they have a game plan and know steps of how to change that, they're not going to be very effective. And, you know, personally, I believe that unless it's a violent crime, you should not go to prison. We are focused on punishment in this country rather than rehabilitation. So the focus should be on rehabilitation, like other countries have done and are doing. And they have very low crime rates and very few repetitive offenders. So they've got to look and be educated about a game plan. It's not the prosecutor that's making the rules.
It is the prosecutor.
Overall, for the state and the legislation. The legislators can change the rules.
They can, but you're going to have to elect a slate of legislators who all agree on how to change the rules versus one prosecutor who's going to exercise their discretion in a different way.
Well, I agree, that's important. But the underlying mentality of how we look at punishment versus rehabilitation, that's the main problem in my opinion. And so I think there's going to need to be a lot of work done to change that perception.
I agree. Paul?
If I may, so this is actually a two-part question. What do we not understand about our Attorney General here in Arizona and how that particular person, right, the nature of that person, if you will, and then with this, we have an Attorney General grant coming up, right, State
Yeah.
Attorney General? I don't think most voters really understand the impact And would you clarify for us, what is that impact, and specifically, how might January Contreras be
Sure.
a contrast to Burnett?
So, two different positions. The State Attorney General, Brnovich, Contreras, hopefully Contreras, and the 15 county attorneys, which are district attorneys. If you're from New York, it's a district attorney. Tucson, it's a county attorney, same thing. The criminal justice aspect of law enforcement is almost, not entirely, but almost exclusively within the county attorney system. So I think what Ms. Contreras can do, if she's elected, and I hope she is she can make it a policy for the small percentage of criminal cases that the state attorney general prosecutes, because they do prosecute some. Her priority is going to be sending less people to prison, more rehabilitation, and focusing on violent crime. And I think if she's elected and she sets that as a priority, it makes it more likely that filters down to those 15 county attorneys, and it becomes a state wave. And it makes the next county attorney's elections, it makes it more of an issue in those elections. But the AG really is not responsible for very much of the criminal prosecutions. It's very local. And just one other point, and I'll take the next hand. I think that's probably why the problem has become so bad, and it's been so difficult to fix it. Because it's not like War and Peace. It's not like taxes. It's a different problem in every county in the country. And to fix it, you have to fix every single county. To fix education in Arizona, you got to fix the Arizona State Legislature. To fix mass incarceration in Arizona, you have 15 different localities that you have to talk about. Mike.
This person brought up rehabilitation. My question is, there used to be rehabilitation practices in our state prisons and probably county jails and hopefully in the juvenile justice system here in Pima County. Is there any rehabilitation in private prisons, and what happened to the rehabilitation classes in state prisons?
What happened to them in state prisons is what happened to them in private prisons. There's almost none in private prisons. There are far too few in state prisons. And what happened is capitalism. So you have a $20 billion DOC budget, and you have to incarcerate 42,000 people a year. Well, incarcerating 42,000 people a year doesn't cost $20 billion. It costs $30 billion. So where are you going to cut expenses? You're not going to fire guards, and you're not going to close prisons, but you're going to fire librarians and social workers. You're going to end Narcotics Anonymous classes. You're going to end Alcoholics Anonymous classes. You're going to have one chaplain instead of 6. Same thing with schools. Where do you cut in schools? You cut the non-essential employees, who are as essential as the essential employees, but it just looks better on the balance sheet. Sorry?
I have a comment and then a question. So the first comment is towards the conversation that we're having about people being stripped of their rights because they committed a felony. And just on a better note, we are actually, I think, one of the only, if not the only Western country, civilized, right, what we call ourselves rich countries that actually does that. So, and it's looked down on by the UN. There's been papers written about this where we actually take those rights that are given to us by the Constitution away from people that commit a crime. Most countries actually have holes in their prisons. Just to give us an idea of things actually don't have to be this way. They were made by us, we can unmake them. So there are other countries where we can see how a system like this could work and where we have options. And then another point that I wanted to ask you, Joel, is once folks have been criminalized, then they get out on probation, right? Probation asks you that you have a stable job, that you have a stable home, and then that you, more often than that, go to some sort of class where you have to pay the fees on your own, and then pay all of the fees that you had prior to that. So folks already, I mean, I'm looking for a new place, and every single place that I found says I can be a felon. it also checks my credit. And most of them, I can't bring my dog, which sucks, but like, so already felons can't find jobs, they cannot find homes anywhere. I was a teacher at the bartending academy for some time, and almost every single person that walked through that door was a felon. All sorts of different backgrounds, with folks that were just desperate and thought, can I get a job as a bartender with a felony on my record? Luckily, the answer is mostly yes on that end. But does the county attorney have a say over all of those steps that, because after that, right, once you're in the system,
Right.
they pull you back in because
So-
you failed to make those payments and to keep a job.
I think that's a great point. Zyra makes two great points. One, when it comes to getting a job and making it easier for people to get jobs and get loans, that's where Betty and Mary come in. That's where we need a Congress and a state legislature that writes laws prohibiting discrimination
And housing.
against people. What's that?
And housing.
In housing and healthcare and all sorts of things. It prohibits discrimination against people who have felony records. And we need a legislature and a Congress, legislature in Arizona, that writes an expungement law that says if you haven't been arrested in X number of years, your record is wiped clean and sealed. So that's where the legislation comes in. And I think Zyra's point about doing it differently is fantastic, and I'll just ask if, did anybody see, I think it was Netflix or Showtime, there was, I think it was a documentary, and I think it was in Norway. They went into a prison in Norway. Maybe it was Denmark, I don't know, it was one of those advanced Scandinavian countries.
Who do we invade next?
Yeah.
That was,
Was that one?
Yeah.
And they interviewed a guy who was in prison for murder, and he was the chef, and he had a butcher knife this long. And they're talking like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm a chef. You got a butcher knife. It's like, yeah, well, I'm the chef. I need a knife. And it's just, I mean, to Zyra's point, that's what, you don't put somebody in prison to rot and to do nothing, and so that their mind is destroyed. You put them in prison so they can learn a trade, learn a skill, so they can get a job when they get out. And that's how it's done in a lot of places, yes.
There's a movement, well, you probably know about it, restorative justice, which is changing the whole tenor of it. Instead of being responsible to the state, this is about repairing harm between people and involving the community and helping people who have been incarcerated come out and be able to receive support instead of just reporting to one probation officer. I mean, this is going to take revamping the whole thing. But in the Department of Corrections, and I think it was Michigan and Minnesota, they did have a restorative justice component in community corrections, which was successful.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of it.
It's a great program.
right.
I wonder, I feel like the conversation often we get stuck in these binaries of violent and non-violent, and there's deserving and undeserving people when they come out. And I wonder if you could kind of offer us kind of some more nuance, because there is this idea like, oh, well, the non-violent people, they're totally fine, we should let them come back, we should give them housing, we should give them jobs, but the violent people deserve, right, any sort of kind of those collateral consequences that people get out face. So if you could kind of complicate our understanding of that, because I have a very hard time. We oftentimes fall into those binaries, and it's problematic.
See, just to be clear, you're asking a lawyer to complicate your understanding of the law. Everyone heard her say that. She's asking a lawyer to complicate things. It's definitional. It's definitional. So how do we, somebody who's accused of a violent crime deserves to go to prison. Somebody who's accused of a non-violent crime doesn't deserve to go to prison. Well, let me tell you about two different people. You have one person, is that your case? The liquor store case? With a knife?
Yes.
So Nate is a good friend of mine and a public defender. Nate has a case in which a juvenile with mental health issues,
15 years old.
15 years old, mental health issues, right?
Very much, yeah.
Goes into a liquor store, steals beer.
He stole cigarettes from behind the counter. His mom went out of town and he went off his medication.
And he showed the clerk a knife.
He showed him the knife handle from in his pocket.
Yeah, violent offender. Charged as a violent offender.
Charges an adult.
Charged an adult with a violent offender. The guy who, another of our clients, who, there's two people, one of them was an auto body shop, a 65-year-old owner of an auto body shop. He was killed, and they took his body out to, allegedly took his body out to Desert, remember that a couple months ago? Violent offender. Those are both violent offenders under Arizona law.
You're saying the charge doesn't necessarily validate the
Thank you.
conviction.
And they had discretion to not charge him that way and to charge him as a juvenile.
Yep.
And we asked, and we presented the mental health issues before he was indicted. We asked the county attorney to treat him as a juvenile, and they had options to charge him so he could be charged as a juvenile. And they chose, knowing his mental health issues and the background we gave them, they chose to charge him as a violent offender adult.
So I want to move on to the last hands, Morgan, and then this gentleman. So Morgan, you went
Just real
first.
quick, I'm all for, getting a new prosecutor. I can see the benefits of that. How do you convince the voting public at large that people that commit crime aren't bad people? That they're just people that, bad situation, bad circumstances, things like that? Because it's like, to get away from this tough on crime model, I feel like everyone in the room here obviously is all about it. But how do you get the mass population to say tough on crime isn't the right way? Because it's very convincing when people, tout that.
We had this discussion on the board of Planned Parenthood in the context of abortion. How do we destigmatize abortion? Because why is it pro-choice? Why is it that we think abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, when there's nothing wrong with abortion? It's a medical procedure. If you want to choose an abortion, you choose an abortion. I think the tactic that we take, and there's a wonderful book called Choice, which talks about this. The tactic we take on abortion is the same that we take in criminal justice, which is that we come out of the closet. We talk about our friends and family members who were arrested, or ourselves who were arrested or spent a night in jail, got a DUI, did something stupid, or, in my case, drove when they shouldn't have drove, and there would, by the grace of God, go I, because there are plenty of times in college I should have gotten a DUI, but I didn't, and I could have easily killed somebody, but thank God I didn't. And so the criminal justice system could just as easily oppress me as it does them. I think we destigmatize it by bringing it home. And with all the people, the 2.1 million people involved in the criminal justice system today, very, very few of us don't know somebody in our friend circle or a family network that has not been subjected to the system. Yes, sir.
So I have two questions. One is, what's the common rationale prosecutors are using to bring the most aggressive charge?
It's changing.
Okay.
It was war on crime. The best way to win an election as an American prosecutor from time immemorial until 2016 was, I'm going to keep you safe, the bad men are out to get you. I'm going to use coded racial language to imply the bad men are black men, and the only thing standing between your children being kidnapped and murdered by them is me. Tough on crime, I'm sending everybody to jail. And that is an extremely convincing emotional response. Oh, you're going to protect my kids? Oh, I'm electing you. Yeah, all that stuff that I, as a good liberal, care about, ending racial disparity and restorative justice and all that. Oh, but you're talking about protecting my children, so you got my vote. That's the rationale. I think it's changing. I think it's slowly changing with Ms. Fox in Chicago, with Ms. Krasner in Philadelphia. People are starting to lose elections now running on the tough on crime platform. Yeah.
My second one is partly to Krasner's memo. Barbara Wall, the county attorney here, says that she has to bring a specific charge. And
Sorry.
so that discretion that we're referring to is, hey, she can bring the kind of the hardship charge, and then you were saying yourself, if you hit someone, she could bring the reckless driving. So is she's still bringing a charge regardless of which one is present, and so would she still be meeting her legislative responsibility at that point? Does she have to bring something? What?
No. There is 30, 40 years of Arizona case law which says discretion is solely up to the prosecutor. She can bring everything. She can charge them with nothing. She doesn't have to do anything. And nobody can do anything about it. Absolutely nobody can do anything about it. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, to comment that I think one of the most important things that anyone can do is to go and be on a jury.
Yeah.
because you actually see the process. There's a whole process that occurs when they choose the jurors. I mean, it's so clear. You can see class, you can see racism, you can see professionalism, you can see all of that in there. But when you're sitting there as a juror, you really do have an opportunity to make a difference. I mean, I never wanted to do it until I got to Arizona. And I know that I made a difference in that particular jury that I was on. So whoever doesn't want to do it, just do it.
And if you want to see
Do it.
a part of that, and if you're not selected for the jury, Pima County Superior Court, Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 10:30. Open to the public, turn off your cell phones, go in and watch morning court. Tuesday through Friday, 9 to 10:30, any criminal division, there's a directory in the lobby, Pima County Superior Court. Your mind will be blown. Yes, sir.
A couple of things. The first thing I'm going to say is I'm preaching to the choir, but I think the very basic thing here is that you can be involved in getting people registered to vote. That is the most significant thing in this whole scene. The other thing I want to ask you is this. You're a public defender, and that's part of the laws.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
So,
I'm ignorant.
So it's okay. It's not. Trust me. You're in good company. You have the Pima County Board of Supervisors.
Okay.
Pima County Board of Supervisors has the Health Department, Sheriff's Department. They have the Public Defender's Office.
Okay.
Separate and apart from that, you have the County Attorney, Barbara
Okay.
Lowell. Totally separate.
Okay.
Marion?
So it seemed to me that prior to this last election, states, including some conservative states, were starting to wake up to this idea that fiscally it made more sense to not incarcerate people. And then everything went off the rails. Is that accurate?
Except for the second part. I don't know that everything went off the rails. So we've been building mass incarceration and institutionalizing criminal injustice for generations. The fact that we did not sweep California primary DA elections last month should not discourage us. It took us generations to get here. We're making progress. And I think the fiscal argument is a really good one, and I've seen it work. When I talk to conservatives, Republicans, when I've been on talk radio, right-wing talk radio, I don't say any of the shit I said to you guys. Nothing. Why would I talk about racial disparity? What I tell them is, you hate welfare? Prisons are the biggest welfare system there is. Mass incarceration is the biggest welfare system there is. You want to get people off welfare? Start closing prisons. You want to cut taxes? Start closing prisons. I don't say anything about human rights to them. Why would I? Because I want to sell them with what they believe. Yes, sir.
Fairly quick question, because you seem to have some pretty good knowledge of this stuff. Is there any statistic that you've come across that can tell us if there's a certain age group where people start getting incarcerated the most? Let's say 13, 16, 18.
Well, I mean, I think the age group that people start getting incarcerated can vary. I mean, in Arizona, you can prosecute a juvenile as an adult if they're, what, 15, 14? 14. And you can prosecute a juvenile in the juvenile justice system if they're 8. So, but what's very interesting when it comes to cutting prison populations is that the people who commit crime, we know who commits crime, real crime, not drug offenses, but we know who commits real crime. It is 18 to 30-year-old men. There is very little reason to keep anybody in prison past the age of 30. 18 to 30-year-old men commit the crime that we conventionally conceive of as crime. So if we really wanted to focus on reducing crime, we would really focus in on that age group. Because after 30, they're too old, they don't care, they want to get a job, they want to get a girlfriend. It just, there's no reason you're keeping them in prison except spending money. I see your hand, Mike, but I want to take anybody else who hasn't asked a question yet.
Do you think you could hand out anything giving people the deadlines to vote in this coming up election at your clinics on Wednesday?
Sure, happy to.
Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say, they actually have done statistics, and they show that by the time you're in the 3rd grade, they already have you pegged.
Yeah.
for where you're going, whether you're gonna go into juvie and then you're gonna go into jail. And that mostly, really, I know for sure that that has to do with black children. I'm sure it has to do with all children of color. And it's just there.
Yeah.
They already have sent you on a path. And if you're on that path, you know, their statistics are probably 80% right.
It's 8:02. I think we have time for one more really
Just
good
real
question.
quick.
Mike?
She's exactly right. Third grade reading scores are how they determine how many beds they're gonna need in prisons 20 years later. Or 10 years later or something. The other thing, when the redistricting commission was working in 2010, I guess it was in, there were counties, probably specifically Florence County, where they were trying to get the inmates counted as population, even though, as you said.
Oh, they do. They do. Inmates are counted. I mean, the system is amazing. So, and it dates back to the 3/5 clause of the United States Constitution. So back then, the South exercised disproportionate political power because African slaves were counted in the census, and that's how they allocated seats in the House of Representatives, but they couldn't vote. So the South had disproportionate political power in pre-bellum America. It's the exact same thing in the criminal justice system. Those inmates in Florence are counted in the census when it comes to representation, when it comes to budget, but they can't vote against the people who passed the laws that oppressed them and sent them to prison in the first place. It's genius. It's absolutely genius. It's great. Anything else? All right, thank you all.